Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Tony, and if you are following me, you know that we're really stuck into this build. This is another amazing kit from Armortek. It's the SD.KFZ.7. That is actually getting easier to say. And another amazing 1:6 scale full metal kit from Armortek, and it is an absolute pleasure to work with all these amazing parts. This is my very first commission build, and another thank you to Peter Windmill, who is the owner of this kit and has entrusted me to build it for him. And Peter, I really hope that you're enjoying these videos, and of course hopefully approve of the way I'm going around building it. Slightly longer talky bit at the front this time because I've got a couple of bits of news for you. Let's do that first. So firstly, thank you to Monster Colours, the manufacturers or suppliers of the King's Army paint, because they've had some orders using the link that's on was on the description of my videos. They've increased the discount up to 10%. So all of you that have been ordering that, thank you so much. But now if you want some more paint, please look at the description of this video and it'll take you straight to the Tony's Workshop discount area, and you'll get a 10% discount now. So a massive thank you to Monster Colours for supporting us builders like you are. And also I wanted to share with you, at the end of this video I'll talk about this, but this is one of the wheel arches. Now I don't know if you remember when I unboxed this. Armortek have made these wheel arches and the radiator housing. They're just beautiful, and they're cast pieces, but they are heavily textured. And of course in the real vehicle and the ones I've seen and the reference books, it's a smooth finish. It would be probably a rolled steel and painted, so it's a smooth finish. So I've come up with a solution for that, and I've gone ahead and I've done all of that work, and I'm really pleased with the results. But I will talk you through that at the end of this video. There is a video about that on the members area, so if you're a member and you haven't checked that out yet, please check it out, because I'll go into detail about how I'm going about getting this finish on there, but I'll talk a bit more at the end of this video on that. So let's talk about the next step. Well, in the last video we did the winch housing, test fitted the motor, we had to do some adjustments, and really pleased with that. I've got the cable onto the wheel and I've just got that tied up over there with a cable tie just on the tension. This will have to come off for painting for the wheel. We also installed the axle arms and masked those up ready for painting. So then I'm thinking, right, what the next logical step? The next logical step for me would be to get this primed, cleaned and primed. And there's lots of parts I felt was ready to go, I believe should go on now ahead of that. So I've skipped ahead a few, I've gone through the instructions and I've found all the parts that would be the body mount parts. So these are all the parts that support the main body when it sits on top of the chassis. So I'm going to put all those on today. I'm also going to put on the track tensioning system, and if we get time I'm going to do the steering system, some of the links on the steering system, because I feel that they should be primed, cleaned and primed at this stage as well. And all of this needs to be done ahead of the next step, which will be the wheels, I guess. So ahead of that I have primed these ready to go on, and the main reason I primed them is that when I got them out of the bags they already started to, because they're mild steel, they already started to oxidize, and I really don't like putting that kind of material against aluminium, because it potentially can start a corrosion process. So I've cleaned them up and I've now got them primed, so I'm really happy that they can go on with no issues onto the chassis. And that's about it. So I'm going to reposition the camera in a minute and we'll get started. But I just want to say another thank you to all of you. All your amazing support is incredible. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe, because we've got a long journey ahead of us with this. Come and join the gang, shall we say, and come on this journey with us. There's a huge amount of work to do in this, and I'm looking forward to every single session. So that's it. I will now reposition the camera and we get started. Okay, so although I have primed these front bulkhead supports, and they go kind of like that, and then there's a bulkhead that runs across here. I was going to put these on, but I've decided against it, because these sit higher than the main sort of body support. I don't want to get these damaged. It's quite thin gauge metal, but that's where they particularly go. But one thing to be mindful, and I'm glad I've done these now, is that the wheel arch for this side slides on in that position. Just hold that there, and then that goes over the top, and because it's got this tail on it, it extends over and helps support that. So that will go on, not at this stage. So I've decided not to put these on today. It's not going to affect anything because they are already primed. So we can crack on. So I'm going to carry on now, and we're going to start looking at the main body supports, which we'll do right now. So I'm going to start at the back here, and the principle is that you've got these little aluminium shims which sit on top of the chassis like that, and then this gets bolted into place by two M3 10mm hex fixings like that. But because it's all a bit awkward, I mean, you've got to try and get a socket in at an angle and all that, this is going to have to be done by hand and then tightened up by, I think, a long nose pliers. But I don't want to do that just yet. What I want to do is, because I'm going to just test, this is the 10mm hex fitting, and see that's stiff there, so we don't want to be dealing with that when everything's on. So I'm going to just turn that fixing all the way through the hole. These are threaded holes, so with a great deal of relief I don't have to worry about getting a nut on the end of them, because that would be awkward. Now that should now spin all the way through reasonably nicely and easily by hand, and then we can just tighten it off with a pair of long nose pliers. I just think that if you don't do this and you get into a position where it's tight, it's only because the hole needs to be cleaned up from its manufacturing process, and the temptation is to, you know, put your little tap and die set out and try that, but I don't think you need to do this. You've got a steel bolt effectively going through an aluminium threaded hole, so that once it's cleaned out it goes through. I'm just going to wind that in by hand. Yeah, that's nice and easy now. I think it's worth doing that. Last thing you want to do is get into this and then find you have the same issue, or a difficulty winding the nuts or the bolts through. So that's that. We'll do both of these. And then once I've got this done, we can then put these on. That's nice. That's it. We can now comfortably install those. So go and do that. Right, so first shim goes on. There's no thread through that, just a hole. And then these face with the web of the support facing out. Just put the nut through that. See if I can just turn this around so I can have a look. It's awkward. That's it. See what I mean? Now these can be just spun in by hand, and we can tighten them off once they're both in. I'll try and do this so I don't block the camera. That's quite straightforward to do it like that, so I'm glad we did that. Now I can just go in, because I don't think, because of the angle of that, I'm not going to get that on, I'm not going to get a socket on that, so this is going to have to be done by hand. No thread locker, because this is going into an aluminium threaded hole. It should bite nicely. That's that one. Could probably go down a little bit more by hand, and it does. See, without cleaning those holes out, I think that would be hard work. Just checking that you can see this on the camera. Again, I'm not bothered if I damage the primer, because it's all going to be painted again. That's on there. That's it, nice and tight. So that's the first one. Do the other one. So that's that one. I'll tell you what, I'll do this off camera and then we'll come on and do the mid sort of chassis ones. Okay, so that's that side done as well. I actually found, I forgot that I've got a little bag of mini spanners, and that was actually really nice and easy to get in there and tighten these off really tight. But I'd just like to show you that you can build these things with most tools. So I've just parked up the long nose pliers away. Right, so I've cleaned these holes out already. The only thing to be mindful of is there is two different types of shims. I don't know if you can see that. One with the holes are closer together. Let me just move that light out of the way, it's probably too bright. One that the holes are closer together and one that the holes are further apart. Just make sure you line up the right shim to the right holes, and that is correct. So now, because we've cleaned these holes out, I'm hoping that this will be quite straightforward. I'm going to put the back one in first, because that is by far the most awkward. Just trying to locate that into its hole, bring that light back down. Just want to get a few turns by hand. And then we can crack on with this little spanner. I'm putting this back one in because if you put the front one in first, you probably won't get to the back one, because it is awkward and tight to get in. This little spanner seems to be doing the job, but you could equally do this with your long nose pliers. I'm actually going to drive this one in so it's tight. Just line everything up first. Almost there, just patience and perseverance. Seems to be going on forever. It's starting, I can feel it starting to tighten up now. Right, let's just make sure that's all lined up. Make sure I can get that bolt through into that. Feel the hole. Yep. This won't come out now. And then just tighten this up at the back. That's it, nice and tight. Get that bolt in. Again, just because we've cleaned the holes up, it makes life so much easier. Right, get on this now and tighten this up. Right, almost there. I can feel that starting to bite. It's taking forever. Okay, that's it. That's it. Getting tight now. Don't over tighten because you could shear the head off. So that's that done. We'll now do the other side. This side here. Same deal. Narrow shimmies. Narrow shimmer. Narrow shim, I should say. Don't know what I'm talking about. Goes in there. Right, I'll probably I'll carry on with this. No, put the back one in first, Tony. You probably can't see that, the glare. I'll carry on with this and then we'll come and do the next one. So I went ahead and just finished them all off. I didn't think you'd want to see that being filmed. No issues. The only point of note is that the fixings for these single ones here are just 5mm hex fixing rather than the 10mm here, because there's no shims on these, but no problems. Again, just clean up the holes and they went in really easy. So now I'm going to go on and do the track tensioner arms. So what I'll do though is I'll zoom the camera in a little bit so you can see what's involved in that. Now we're on to the track tensioning system. The track tensioning system is made up of 3 components, and these are packed as a pair, left and right, in the same bag, which makes life really easy for finding them. I've already given these a wipe over just to degrease them. And the first thing you've got to do here, but basically the theory is this link arm gets attached to this idler axle here, this idler axle itself. Then that passes through into that. Slide that in. Link goes onto that. This winds on the bottom here like that. And then once it's all connected, that will move the idler arm forward and back like that as you turn it, and it's all secured with a great big nut on the end of this bit here. So that's the setup. As you can see, this needs to go in first, I think. I'm going to keep it all loose. I am thinking about just putting a little bit of grease on this, just to stop that from corroding, and also just, there's no bush with this, so that's it. I'll pop that in there, get the excess grease off, leave that in there loose. Link arm goes in there, spin the idler arm around, just position that loosely there. Now this is fixed with a 12mm M4 button fix, and I'm going to put some thread locker just on the end. Actually, I'll take that off. I'll do that once it's passed through that shaft. I might use the hex tool just to wind that through. It's not, I don't want to push it through and damage the thread. That's it. Okay, now let's get a little bit of, I'm using a bit of red thread locker. Let's move that down underneath there so I can get to it. And the only reason I'm doing that is I just don't want this nut to work itself loose at any point. Put that nut on the end of that. Hold it in position. Might get the forceps. Now equipped with the forceps. That's better. I don't want this to be too tight because I want to have movement in this. I think that's got to be all nice and fairly loose, because obviously when this winds on here, let's wind this into position now. Hopefully you can see how that works. Moving front and back. So you want that to be fairly loose. Might just tighten that up a little bit more. That's it. By doing this is what allows the tracks to be tensioned. Now that's all in, that's all good. There's a great big M6 nut that goes on the back of this. There's no washer required, no washer mentioned. And again, I'm tempted to put a bit of red thread locker on that, just don't want that coming undone. Just a tiny bit. Just wind that in. Hopefully that's just going to go in by hand. Yeah, just hand tight. And now hopefully you can see that doing its thing. Moving forwards and backwards. Nice and simple. And really easy to get to as well. So I'm going to leave this at its loosest point for now. Once the tracks go on, we can then mess about with that. I think that's fine. You could probably turn that. It doesn't actually rotate, so I'm going to tighten that up. That's in. This needs to be fixed. That's good. And that's it. Nice and simple. One thing I have checked is I'm checking down the line of these. I've made sure that they're all straight and true, because obviously the body, when it goes on, needs to line up with all these holes, and I don't know how easy that is at this stage, but I've made sure that these are all straight and true. I'm also looking down the line of that, and that is perfectly true. I don't need to, do anything other than eye it in at this stage. So that's that. That's really nice detail. Right, okay. Do the other side. Just as simple, hopefully. So we'll pass this through. It's difficult to show you this on the camera. Do you know, I'll do this. You've seen how that goes. I'll put this on and then we'll come back and talk about what the next step is. Right. The last part I want to go through in this session is probably the most critical part of the build so far. This is so critical to the steering, so I'm going to try and talk you through this, but it's another example of where the static build needs to mesh with the option pack, because there's a few parts that need to go on to make sure that when it's all running, it's running correctly, and you only get those parts in the option pack. I'll give an example. So we've got these two stub axles here. There is no apparent difference apart from one has got a hole in it, or a threaded hole for a grub screw. And if you look at this here, you'll see, I don't know if you can see that in the camera, there's a hole I've plugged up. This is where the servo will be mounted on this side. So looking at the vehicle, this being the front, this will be the left hand side, the servo is mounted on this side. That servo comes out to an arm, and then that links to a rod, which then links down to the steering and allows the steering to be pulled left and right. So that side here, this side, is the one that this grub screw has to go on, because that retains a link arm that links the whole thing together. So that's one point there. The other thing I want to think about is I had some experience when I built the Baja. So you have this tie rod here, which then basically links the steering. What I need to make sure is I set these out correctly, so when the wheels are on, they're tracked as accurately as possible. The difference between when I did the Baja build, for instance, because of the speed the Baja goes in its rear wheel drive, I tapered the wheels, I tracked the wheels or tapered them in ever so slightly towards the chassis. So in this kind of configuration, I'm exaggerating, but in this kind of configuration. So when the force came through from the rear wheels and it was driving at 60 miles an hour, it did force those wheels open to run straight. This is going to be different because there's not going to be that kind of speed, I think. So I'm going to run these perfectly parallel, and that's just a note. So I'll get cracking, and I'll try and talk you through this as much as I'm trying to find my way through it as well. We'll do this together. Right, there's a few things that chicken and egg kind of thing. So what I'm going to do initially, I'm going to put these little what's the code of these? These are called HPC RSSA. Well, basically steering joints. They say there's an A and a B, but I don't think there's any. I've had a look. I don't think there's any difference in them. So I'm just going to wind these on just ever so gently, not all the way on. I'm going to take that nut off for now. Now these will sit in this kind of orientation here, with the knuckle being underneath, sitting across the bridle arm like that. And the really important thing is that we need to make sure that when these stub axles go on, that they line up and they sit perfectly straight. So there'll be some adjustment in this, and we may have to mess around a little bit just to get that right. So we'll start off by just leaving that in place there. Let's put on the simple side, the right hand side. So this is the side that's got no grub screws in at all. This sits in, actually no, it'll probably be better to do this side because it's easier in the camera. You can see, let's just move this around, hopefully you can see that. Right, so now I'm going to just park that one up, I don't want to get confused. So this stub axle goes into this position here. There's a pin that goes through and locks that into position, and that's going to be how your whole wheel is steered. Interestingly, the way Armortek show it on the instructions almost gives you a suggestion that you build the wheel first and then put it on, but I don't believe they mean that. Let's do one thing at a time. So this here, no, this is the main axle here. This gets screwed into this position here. Just got to thread it. So that goes in there. I'm thinking, could that possibly unwind? So I'm just going to put a very small amount of thread locker on that. Just don't want that coming unwound. and that is in there as tight as possible. Now, and that's what your wheel sits on here. That goes over the top of that, and then that links to that. But before we do that, on this particular one, or on both of them, there is this link arm here. Now these are angled, so they're slightly tapered towards the thread. Well, that's hard to show you on the camera, but I'm just making sure, hopefully you can see that. It's tapered up towards the thread. And the orientation of this should be that this points towards the wheel with the cuter angle pointing towards the wheel. Hope that makes sense. So this one goes in on this side. So this is where it's going to be presented. It's going to be on this side, the side that's going to be facing towards the rear of the vehicle. And then I'm going to thread that in so that, just going to wind that in like that. I'm not going to use thread locker on this. So that goes in that position there. So this is pointing towards the wheel rather than pointing towards the body. I'm not sure if you can see. Can you see that angle? It looks as if there's another turn on that. Well, let me see if that's possible. No. I don't like the idea that that's not tight up against the main body of that. So I'm going to start threading it in a different location and see if we end up in a better position. Let's start here. Right. No, in exactly the same position. Just don't like the idea that that's not all the way in, but let's have one more go at that. No, it doesn't seem to want to, but I think that'll be fine. I'm not going to put any thread locker on that because once this is locked into this, it will not be able to turn and wind itself out, so that'll be fine. The only difference with this side is there is another link arm which is part of the option pack, and this is the link arm that connects this. There's another tie rod, which is this one here, links this to the servo. So I'm going to put that in now as well, and this is the one that they ask us to lock in with a grub screw. It does actually say Loctite this in as well, but I don't know, until I get all this set up and I've got the servo running, I'm not going to do that, but I will put it on for the purposes of painting. Now my instinct is that this needs to be, let's just see, no, my instinct is that this needs to be riding higher up, so it rides above, just so it clears everything. So that will go on there. If we position this, it's all very loose at the moment, if we position that into position there, just pop the pin in just for now, just for the top, and that's that. Now I'm going to come across and do the same this side. If you can see that in the camera. I'm going to pop the axle on first, which will go this end, so I'll put the thread locker on that. That's not going to be an issue. That's going to slide into position there. Again, we've got to install the this link arm, and that goes on this side again, so that the taper or the acuter angle points towards the wheel. I'm not sure what this threaded hole's for. I think obvious at the moment. Right, so that's that. That goes on to there. Pop, turn that round. Keeping it all very loose at the moment, just to allow me to see what the alignment is. Pop that pin in. Right, so now I need to look down here, and I can see that if this one is perfectly in line with the axle, this one is going forward, so that would mean that this needs to be turned back. So pop that off and hold that there and then wind that in. Pop that back on there again. Lining this one up here, that needs to go back a little bit more. Try that. Looking at down the line, that looks perfect now to me. So these are now perfectly in line. So when this rotates, one wheel will turn out, one wheel will turn in. You can see that. So in essence, that is the way it's all set up. So now it's a matter of now I'm happy with that, is just tightening everything up. This tie rod here seems to be quite comfortable sitting on this bridle arm here, and as it shows that in the instructions, that's got to be correct and makes sense. So I'm really happy with that. I think that'll probably do us for now. I think I can, with a high degree of confidence, get those nuts on. Again, I'm not doing anything at this stage with thread locker because I'm not going to finalize everything until I've got the servo on and tested. But you know, just happy with that. We can put the nut on the bottom of these pins. There's a nut that goes on the bottom of that pin. There's no mention of a... Is there any mention of... I've got to go and get the right nuts. Let me go and get the right nuts, I'm sorry. I'm going to need some M5 nuts. I just need to go and get a couple of M5 nuts, put these on the pins, and then we'll move forward. Okay, got my nuts. It's okay. There's a joke in there somewhere, I'm sure. Again, I'm not putting any thread lock or any of this. Just want this to be all in there, sort of in a position that I can get them out when I need to. I just might need just a bit of a tap. It's tapped in. Sorry, I know it's difficult to see in the camera. Hopefully you saw what went on the left hand side. The only difference on the right hand side is there's no servo arm link to it. So I'm just winding that in like that, because I want all this to be primed and painted. And just going back to have a look. Nothing's moved. No, absolutely spot on, perfect. Right, just hand tightening these all up. And then we've got this link arm here. We need to just, I'm not going to put it on now actually, but I'm just talking you through. So this link arm from the instructions goes into the top part here. And then what we need to do is make sure, just take that nut off, that it lines up without turning the wheels with the hole in the servo, and it doesn't at the moment, so that would have to be unwound. Now it does. So that's need to be perfectly straight. Of course, and when the servo moves this, it will move, if that's bolted in, of course, it's not bolted in at the moment, but when the servo rotates, it will move the steering left and right. Like that. But I'm not putting this on just yet, but I just wanted to test that. It all seems fine to me. There is a little grub screw I'm going to put in, which I'll do that now. I don't want to forget to do that. Put this to one side for now. It's a little grub screw we can put in on here. Again, I'm not using any thread locker. Just going to wind that in. Once everything's fitted, I don't know why that's not going in there actually. I wonder if that is, it looks a thicker gauge than 3. Okay, well, I'll have a look at that. Right, that's interesting. It is the right gauge, but when if I unwind this now, for argument's sake, that will go in there. Always classic, isn't it? Right. So if I wind that, that screws in, no problem at all. However, I can't. It clashes. I unwind this, wind this in. Wind that in, sorry. Bring it up to the top. That will not go in there now. It's almost like it's in, I don't know, it could be in the wrong position, who knows. I'm not bothered about that because when I've set everything and I'm happy with the steering, so that just will not go in there. When I'm happy with everything and I've set everything, I'll put this in with some red thread locker, and that's not going to move. So that's that. Anyway, sorry, wasted enough time talking about grub screws. So that's it. I'm just checking again, looking down the line of that. I don't know if you can see in the camera, but it's absolutely perfect. So when the wheels go on, that will work perfectly. Right, now, I think I'm ready to give this bad boy its first proper bath, and then we'll go on and prime it. But I'm going to have a bit of a tidy up, and then I'll come back to camera to talk you through the plan after that. So that's it. I'm about ready to get this painted. I'm really chuffed to bits because it seems like it's taken some time, but when you see it all assembled like this, it's such an impressive kit. So just to retrack, what have we done today? We put all the body mounts on. I've got them in alignment. Put the track tensioning system on when we've done the front steering, albeit all loosely put together, because until I get the servo installed and tested, I won't tighten anything up until that stage. So now it's going to get a good clean, and then it's going to get primed. So the next time you see this, it will be in its primer coat. And I suspect it's probably going to need, I don't know, definitely 3 coats, I think, to get a really good coat, and then I'm going to leave it 48 hours so it really hardens up nicely, and then I think once it's been primed, it's going to look quite impressive. I will of course have to take the cable off the winch wheel to paint that, not the cable but the winch wheel itself. And then once it's all primed, I'll be happy just to leave that to one side for the time being, because the next step will be to get on and start building all the wheels. So I can get those all primed as well, and then probably build the front wheel hub itself as well, both sides, get those primed. So there's a lot to do still, and I'm actually really chuffed with how it's going together. And Peter, if you're watching this, I really hope that you're enjoying this as much as I am, and appreciate hopefully the way I'm going about building your kit for you. So just want to talk about these wheel arches. I mentioned them at the beginning of the video. So these wheel arches, when they came from Armortek, they are beautifully made and no question about it. But they had a heavily textured finish, and that's not what I want on Peter's vehicle. So these are now smooth, really chuffed. And I used a spray putty and a product that I found. Now, I've never used this before, but I used this particular product here. And again, they're not sponsoring me. It's just a product that I found. It took 1.5 tins to do this. And it took, the whole thing took about 10 hours to complete. So basically, I just gave them a bit of a rub down initially, but it was still very textured, very heavily textured. I didn't want to put any machines on it. I wanted to do all this by hand. And then once I got it all cleaned up, I then went about applying the coats of this spray putty. And I was dubious at first, but actually by the time the 3rd coat went on, it really started to showing the job it does. In the end, it was about 6 coats I did. I had a bit of a rub down in between the final coat, in the last coat and the final coat, and now just using wet and dry, very fine wet and dry paper, which was like, I think it was 1200 grit, something like that. I've managed to get a beautiful finish. These are so smooth, and I can't wait to see these primed and painted as well. And that went the same with the radiator housing, which again was quite heavily textured, but it's just come up so smooth, and I think once it's painted it's going to look right for that. And while I was doing this, I was thinking about some other details on it, because as far as I know, and I haven't found it yet, but I think there's a mesh that goes in the front of the grille here. But I've got some mesh that I've managed to track down, which is about right in scale. So I'll be looking to install that, because looking at the instructions and everything that I've got so far, sitting behind this is the battery tray. And in the battery tray, you bolt the speaker to it. So that makes sense, because the speaker's going to throw sound out the front here, which will be right. But then what I don't want to do is be able to see the speaker through this. I know you've got your vertical slatted grille, but I wanted to put a mesh behind it to try and block out the speaker. So that's one thing. And then I'm also looking at the radiator cap. I had a quick look in the bag, and it's there, and it's supplied by Armortek, but it's just a perfectly beautifully machined round. But in the photographs that Peter sent me in my reference books, that looks like it's got a bit of a grip on it. So I might do something with that as well. It's just interesting when you start working with one particular part, you start thinking about other parts associated with that, but that's so much further down the road. But anyway, that's it. So that was the process I used, and I would recommend it if you're doing something like this and you want to try and get a really soft, smooth surface. I watched 1 or 2 videos on YouTube just to see how it's applied, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's a brilliant product, and if I ever have this problem again, I'll definitely use that. So that's they are going to sit to one side, and I'll probably prime these when I'm priming the chassis. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to do them when I did, but just really chuffed to pieces with them, really lovely. So that's that. You have to remember though, it does add thickness to the surface, so that's something to be mindful of. So I've tried to flatten it off as much as I possibly could, but I'm hoping that doesn't have an issue. That's one of the reasons I masked off this back edge. This is also very heavily textured, this back edge here, but then looking at it, this is where some of the flat parts of the steel, the bonnet and the side panels get fixed onto, and I just was worried that you wouldn't get a really nice perfect fit with that. But now I've rubbed them down and kept them clear of the putty. I think that will be fine as well. So that's that. So that's it. So yeah, I mean, the next time you see this, if this will be primed, and we'll start talking about the wheels. In the meantime, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you for your continued support. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe, because as you can see, we're nowhere near finished this. We are a long way off this. A massive thank you again to Peter for entrusting me to build your model for you, Peter, and a huge thank you to my members as well for signing up and getting involved in that. And I will continue to put new content on that as we go through this build. And I'll sign off finally by saying thanks again for all your support. I'm Tony. I love building these kits, and I'm absolutely buzzing about getting into the next session. See you soon.